every country, of course, has the right to develop its relations with other countries, and of course also with China, political relations, economic relations, cultural relations. Every country has these type of relations. But of course one has to keep in mind that China is an authoritarian regime, that when it comes to the economy, its economy is dominated by state-owned companies, and even the private companies are not private and independent in the sense as we know this in the West. There is huge influence, particularly on those companies who are operating abroad. Every company has its cells of the Chinese Communist Party. They cannot avoid it. Even foreign companies operating in China had to accept that. So having said that, it's clear that particularly as a small country, you have to have in mind all the time that you are dealing with a huge country with a different political and economic system. So having said that, means if you are really cautious, there could be a win-win situation also for smaller countries. But this is not necessarily always the case. And we have seen so many other examples from Sri Lanka over countries in the Western Balkans to African countries, where countries actually have gotten into a debt trap because of huge infrastructure investments and credits from China, and of course this at the end is not helping the development of these countries, but it's a long-term burden on their shoulders. So it's well, all countries have relations with China, so there's no reason why Georgia should not have relations with China. But one of course has to also analyze what is the strategic part of a relationship, because as far as we know Chinese international behavior, China is also pushing on the political side for its narrative on Taiwan, its narrative on the South China Sea, its narrative also on NATO and on the EU, on the US, and particularly when it comes to Russia's war on Ukraine. Quite often we have seen that Russia is echoing actually the Russian narrative on Russia's attack. So this is of course something we cannot accept. This is unacceptable. But first we have to recognize it, and this is sometimes not so easy because it's everywhere. It's in China's statements, in international organizations, and sometimes small countries simply do not have the staff, simply do not have the understanding of the cultural background of how China is operating. So it's always good to, particularly for smaller countries who do not have the manpower, to connect with others, to connect with others who have actually the expertise. Well, that's my assessment. Well, of course, the power distribution has not really changed because of the war. But what we have seen is that the West is more unified than ever. And if Putin achieved something, it is the unity of NATO, the unity of the European Union, the unity of the West. The G7 has been 100% critical vis-à-vis Russia's attack on Ukraine. but of course, if you leave the West, which of course is not the geographical West, Japan is part of it, South Korea, Australia, so many countries outside the transatlantic, the NATO region. But we also have seen ever closer cooperation between Russia and China. Russia, of course, would probably like to see much more cooperation from China. China has shied away from sending weapons to Russia. We are not so sure about dual use. This is always difficult to assess, but from a Moscow point of view, Moscow elites have been traditionally suspicious vis-à-vis China, and this is gone, and they are accepting to be the junior partner of a future Russia-China bloc. And of course, for China, this war is an opportunity to keep the Americans involved in Europe, and not to concentrate on them, not to concentrate on the Asia Pacific, on the Indo-Pacific. So that's also why Russia likes to buy the Russian argument that in Ukraine Russia is fighting NATO, and China more and more sees also NATO as part of the new bipolarism they see arriving. Though they always talk of multipolarism, but at the end, what they have in mind is us Chinese against the U.S. So this is the Russia's attack on Ukraine is part of this bigger global setup, and it will have definitely consequences. It will have consequences for us in Europe. We were already afraid, or many in Europe were afraid when President Obama at the time called for a pivot to Asia, that Americans should concentrate on the Asia Pacific and less on Europe. Well, this was even extreme with Donald Trump when he actually was very critical vis-à-vis NATO, even talked about NATO being obsolete. Well, if something has been proven by Russia's attack on Ukraine, it's that NATO is very much needed in Europe for the security of Europe, and even more so in the future. But it's also clear that and we have seen this in the last days in Washington, that we cannot rely 100% on the US. So we have to do much more in Europe in order to foster, to make the European pillar within NATO much more stronger than it is today. And this is something I think we have all learned from Russia's attack on Ukraine. And the other big thing is the global South. We have seen most of the countries have criticized Russia's breach of international law, Russia's attack on Ukraine, but at the same time, many of the countries in the global South, because of other reasons, have not broken with Russia. So we have seen this with the BRICS. So the BRICS is enlarging, the BRICS Plus, but this is not so much the making of Moscow, but it's of the making of China. China wants to apparently build the BRICS as a counterweight to the G7. And I think there is the big global competition between the West, those countries who have built and maintained the global rules-based order, and those who want to undermine it. And I think we can make a good point that the rules-based order is also the preferable order for basically all countries in the world in order to develop, and even for China. If not for the rules-based order, China would probably not have developed the way it has since the late 1970s. So China has very much profited from this international order, which it is currently undermining, to rebuild the order in its own preferences, and this is most likely in the interest of China, and I would even narrow it more down in the interest of the Chinese Communist Party, but not necessarily of the rest of the world. Well, as I said, we are entering a new phase of bipolarism, a new phase of blocs looking for membership, and so I'm not in favor of this. I would have liked it much more a real multilateral global system, not even a multipolar system, a multilateral system with the United Nations in the center. Would have been preferable for us, particularly for small countries, because in the United Nations it's one country, one vote. So the more the United Nations loses importance, the worse it is for smaller countries. But of course, there's also the other side, and we in the West we have to realize that we have not lived up to our proposals to many countries in the world. And the China Belt and Road Initiative, what started is with different names, with OBOR and some other names, and we woke up that many countries in the world need infrastructure for development, and we shied more and more away from big infrastructure projects for ecological reasons, for many reasons. So instruments, international instruments like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, name them, were always more critical when it came to big infrastructure projects. So we're not willing to finance these type of projects. So China stepped in. With the Belt and Road Initiative, China basically built a parallel infrastructure with the BRICS Bank, but also with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. There's no doubt there's need for it, and so we, thanks God, have woken up. The G7 has made suggestions in this regard. The European Union recently has come around with the Global Gateway Initiative, and I think this is to the benefit of smaller countries, particularly smaller developing countries, because they now have different sources of credit lines, different sources of financing of infrastructure projects, and I think this is a good thing for smaller countries.